Welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast. I'm your host, Derval Barzey. We're back with another edition of Climate Change ABCs, where we break down the complex climate change jargon into simple, easy to digest bites. If you'd like to partner with us to spread your advocacy message to our global audience, please reach out to us at theclimateconscious@gmail.com. So let's get into part 5 of Climate Change ABCs. We're starting with the letter O, which stands for ocean acidification. So we know that trees absorb carbon dioxide, but did you know that our oceans also absorb carbon dioxide? With increasing concentration of CO2 released in the atmosphere from human activities such as deforestation, burning of fossil fuels, and other industrial processes, the world's oceans are absorbing more and more carbon dioxide. And this alters the pH of the ocean, making it more acidic than usual. The increased acidity negatively affects marine organisms such as corals, mollusks, and some plankton species. Now, this leads to declines in biodiversity and disruptions in marine food webs, putting fishing industries at risk of economic losses. Corals are particularly vulnerable to acidification. So the most effective way to address ocean acidification is by reducing CO2 emissions globally. So the letter P stands for Paris Agreement. It's impossible to talk about climate action without talking about the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is an international treaty adopted in 2015 under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. The rules for implementing the Paris Agreement were established at COP23, and they are based on a bottom-up approach using the nationally determined contributions developed by individual parties and the top-down approach of collective responsibility. This mechanism is designed to increase climate ambition over time. So the main goals of the Paris Agreement are as follows. Firstly, holding the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Secondly, increasing the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change, building climate resilience, and encouraging low greenhouse gas development. This involves making finance flows consistent with the pathways toward low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. Under the Paris Agreement, developed nations are obligated to provide financial resources to assist developing countries in implementing climate actions, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation. Thirdly, the Paris Agreement aims to reach peak global emissions as soon as possible. So that means global emissions would reach its highest point and from then on consistently decrease over time. Fourthly, establish a goal on adaptation and enhancing adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing vulnerability to climate change. So consistent with this, each country that is a party to the Paris Agreement must prepare, communicate, and maintain successive nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. So these are plans that outline national efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change impacts. And countries are legally bound to update these NDCs every 5 years to reflect increasing ambition to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Every 2 years, parties report on their performance in biennial transparency reports. We discussed NDCs in part 4 of the Climate Change ABC series. I'll add the link down below. Another aspect of the Paris Agreement is the global stocktake. This is a periodic review mechanism to assess collective progress on implementation of the goals. The first global stocktake, or GST, was conducted in 2023. And this collective assessment will be conducted every 5 years. Based on the 2023 GST, we are not on track to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. There's a gap in the implementation of NDCs, and there's also a gap in the projected emission reductions from current NDCs and the emission reduction that is needed to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees. So even if countries were to achieve their NDCs that they have pledged, we're still going to fall short of the Paris Agreement's goal. So there's still a lot more to be done in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the GST has shown that global emissions have continued to grow, although the rate of growth has slowed. The outcomes of the GST should now inform the updated NDCs, taking into account the opportunities and challenges for enhancing action. Now to the letter R. R stands for renewable energy. Renewable energy refers to energy derived from natural sources or processes that are continuously replenished and virtually inexhaustible on a human timescale. These sources include sunlight, wind, water, biomass, and geothermal heat. Unlike fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, which are finite and emit greenhouse gases when burned, renewable energy produces little to no direct greenhouse gas emissions during their energy generation. So renewables offer several benefits. These include avoiding the cost associated with the importation of fossil fuels to produce energy. They also reduce environmental and climate change impacts and avoid carbon emissions. And they offer the benefit of enhancing the resilience of utilities. So CARICOM has a target of its member states producing 47% of its energy from renewables by 2027. So this requires that member states aggressively diversify their country's energy mix to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels. So let's discuss the different types of renewable energy. So first off, we have solar energy, which falls into two categories. There's solar PV, or solar photovoltaic systems, which convert sunlight directly into electricity using solar cells. I'll invite you to check out episode 75, where we spoke about the development of solar energy systems in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. Solar energy can also be used for solar thermal systems, which use sunlight to heat a fluid, which produces steam that drives a turbine to generate electricity. Another source of renewable energy is wind. So wind turbines are used to convert kinetic energy from the wind into mechanical power, which is then converted into electricity using generators. The Wigton wind farm, found in Jamaica, has been operating since 2004, and it is one of the largest wind farms in the English-speaking Caribbean, with a capacity of 62.7 megawatts. There's also hydropower. Hydroelectric power generates electricity by harnessing the energy of flowing or falling water, typically from rivers or dams. Hydropower plants can be found throughout the Caribbean in Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. According to CARILEC, hydropower has been utilized in St. Vincent and the Grenadines since the 1950s. Currently, there are 3 operational hydropower plants on the island of St. Vincent, with a combined installed capacity of 5.6 megawatts. And these plants provide roughly 15% of the country's electricity needs. Another renewable energy source is biomass. Bioenergy can be produced from organic materials such as plant and animal matter. Biomass can be burned directly for heat or converted into biofuels for transportation and electricity generation. Biogas can be produced from the anaerobic digestion of organic matter and used for heating, electricity, or as a vehicle fuel. The Barbados-based company Rum and Sargassum is producing a biofuel utilizing the overgrowth of sargassum and wastewater from rum distilleries in Barbados. This sargassum-based biofuel is being used to run vehicles. And we discussed this innovation in episode 26 of the Climate Conscious podcast, and I'll share the link below. Then there's geothermal energy, which uses heat from within the earth to generate electricity. This heat can be accessed by drilling wells to produce steam, which drive turbines. There is significant geothermal potential across the Caribbean. Geothermal potential can be found in St. Kitts and Nevis, Montserrat, Dominica, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. Last but not least, renewable energy can be produced from ocean energy in several ways. So tidal energy comes from harnessing energy from the rise and fall of tides. Wave energy is captured from the surface motion of ocean waves. Ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC, utilizes temperature differences between warmer surface water and colder deep water to generate electricity. Renewables offer several benefits, including environmental benefits from the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as decreased air pollution in comparison to fossil fuel generated power. Then there are economic benefits from the creation of this new sector where jobs would be created. There would be employment opportunities in the design, installation, and maintenance of renewable energy systems. It also provides energy security where countries can reduce their reliance on imported fossil fuels, and they can reduce their vulnerability to price shocks when oil prices get really high, or if there are geopolitical issues that disrupt the supply of these fossil fuels. This also allows for stable energy prices for consumers, since energy prices would not be as dependent on the price of oil on the global market. Renewable energy also has the potential to create social benefits in the form of community empowerment, as these decentralized energy systems can provide electricity to remote and underserved communities. So along with these benefits, there are also other considerations that must be acknowledged when it comes to renewable energy systems. Many of the renewable sources, like wind and solar, are intermittent, so they are available at certain times during the day, but we require energy 24/7. So therefore, there is a requirement for energy storage to ensure that there is an uninterrupted supply of energy when the sun is not out or when the wind is not blowing. There are higher upfront costs associated with the infrastructure, with developing the infrastructure for renewables. Large-scale projects or large-scale development of renewable energy can also result in land use issues, especially in islands where there are competing interests for limited land space. There may be some contention in terms of using land for residential or agricultural, or even leaving some locations untouched due to the ecosystem value. And with some of the newer technologies, the technology continues to evolve, and there's room for improvement in terms of efficiency, storage solutions, and integration with existing grids. But all in all, renewables are a key climate mitigation strategy. They are crucial for sustainable development as they offer a viable pathway to reduce environmental impact, particularly greenhouse gas emissions. And they also promote economic development and social well-being. Renewables are key to ensuring climate resilience and sustainable development. R also stands for resilience. Climate resilience refers to the ability of a system, community, or society to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the adverse effects of climate change. It involves minimizing the potential damage, maintaining essential functions, and adapting to changes in climate conditions. The anticipation of adverse impacts involves risk assessments and early warning systems. So you want to identify and evaluate potential climate-related risks, such as extreme weather events, sea level rise, and temperature changes. And early warning systems involves implementing technologies and strategies to predict and warn about imminent climate threat to allow for timely action. The Caribbean region is exposed to multiple hazards. Examples of several hazards occurring simultaneously or cascading include the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the last Fray volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Haiti, and tropical cyclones and flooding events across the region. Multiple hazard early warning systems involve the use of a system that centralizes knowledge, responses, and warnings for prioritized hazards. And this increases the efficiency and scale of warnings, thereby minimizing the impact of the disaster. So 4 components of an early warning system are: 1, disaster risk knowledge based on the systematic collection of data and disaster risk assessments. 2, detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards and possible consequences. 3, dissemination and communication from an official source of authoritative, timely, accurate, and actionable warnings and associated information on likelihood and impact. And 4, preparedness at all levels to respond to the warnings received. The capacities for multi-hazard early warning systems are being expanded in the region in countries such as Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So another component of resilience is preparation, and this involves infrastructure as well as people. So modifying buildings and other infrastructure to withstand climate impacts, for example, floods and heat. You also want to develop and implement plans to prepare people, the communities, who may be affected by climate impacts. This includes evacuation routes, emergency shelters, and the allocation of resources. So having prepared, you want to be able to respond. So another component is response, ensuring that there are mechanisms in place to respond to events such as hurricanes, floods, wildfires. And then you also want to make sure that there's a quick mobilization of resources, food, water, medical supplies to support affected persons. So following an event, there's recovery. So you want to plan for rebuilding and restoration in terms of repairing and restoring infrastructure, roads, buildings, electric utilities, for example. And there also should be a plan for economic recovery. How quickly can we get businesses and livelihoods to recover from climate impacts? And this includes offering financial assistance and insurance mechanisms. Then there's adaptation, adjusting practices, policies, and behaviors to reduce vulnerability. So since we know that we're in the Caribbean and from June to November, we have the hurricane season, and we've been seeing storms happening more frequently, but also the intensity of those storms has been increasing. So we can't relocate the Caribbean, but we can enhance our systems, our policies, our behaviors as Caribbean citizens to reduce our vulnerability, right? And this involves addressing behaviors, institutions, and technology. And an example of this is introduction of drought-resistant crops, as well as renewable energy systems, which can withstand the impacts of, let's say, hurricanes. So how can we improve our climate resilience? It involves planning across all sectors. And examples of this are urban planning, the way that we design our cities and our infrastructure, ensuring that it caters to climate change, as well as rural planning, looking at our agricultural systems and the practices that we use and whether they are aligned with the climate conditions that have evolved in our region. Then we can look at ecosystem-based approaches, nature-based solutions that utilize natural systems such as wetlands, mangroves, and forests to help minimize some of the climate impacts. And we discuss nature-based solutions on climate change ABC, so you can check out our previous parts of this series. Community engagement is a big part of it, public awareness and education. And the Climate Conscious podcast is a great resource for this. There's also stakeholder engagement involving local stakeholders in planning and decision-making processes to ensure that it is as inclusive as can be. It caters to the different needs of different groups, marginalized groups, underserved groups, underrepresented groups. So that includes women, it includes Indigenous communities and persons with disabilities. And of course, policy and governance is critical. We want to ensure that when we're formulating or revising policies, that they promote resilience, such as building codes, land use regulations, and climate adaptation plans. And it's always important to build capacity, institutional capacity, strengthening our institutions and governance structures to ensure that these resilience initiatives are implemented and managed effectively. So in this era of climate change, it is imperative that we develop climate resilience at every level. All our institutions and all groups in society need to develop their resilience capacity, need to become more informed and engaged around climate action and climate resilience. By enhancing the capacity of our systems, communities, and societies to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate-related impacts, we can protect our lives and livelihoods and our ecosystems to ensure that we have a sustainable future. So this brings us to the end of part 5 of Climate Change ABCs. If you appreciate the work that we do with the Climate Conscious podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast app. And if your organization would like to partner with us to spread your advocacy message to our global audience, feel free to reach out to us. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. Bye.